Welcome back, students. So the last class we talked about how to make a clay vase, and I wanted you to think about how we went about making that vase. Usually people think you can just squeeze and bend and mold clay any way you want to, but unless you have a plan, things can usually go wrong. So the two ways that we built our vase was by rolling a coil and then pinching through the sides and the top. So coil and pinch are the two methods we used, or the ways that we worked with the clay in order to make the vase. So what has happened to the clay since the last time that you saw it? Well, I wrote your name on the bottom. For the last time that you were working with clay, you were working with wetware, so the clay was mushy and squishy. And then after I got it, I wrote your name on the bottom and let it dry out. And then I loaded it in the kiln. The clay has to be dry before you put it into the kiln. And it seems like it's hard when it's dry, but it's very, very, very delicate. And if you got it wet again, it would turn into mushy clay. So what the kiln does is it superheats the clay up, so all those little rocks melt together, and then they won't turn into mushy clay anymore. They stay that way, whatever way you formed it, forever. So it's really a good idea to use the kiln so your clay doesn't turn mushy squishy again, right? And we call it firing in the kiln. Now your clay is white and it is bisqueware. I put glaze on the inside of it, and glaze is, remember, like a glass. So there's glass on the inside of it. So what would happen is that if you put water in it, the glass would hold the water. If you just poured water on this kind of clay, it's kind of like a really hard sponge, and the water would just drip through it. Remember, the clay doesn't get mushy again, but it just is like a sponge, and it just absorbs the water. Or then when the clay gets too wet, it just drips right through it. Well, you don't want to have drippy clay, so that's why we're using the glaze to hold the water in case you want to put real buds in your vases. And now the bisque clay is ready for decoration, because bisque means that we fired it. So what we're going to do today is use paint rather than glaze. With glaze, like in this blast picture that we did before, you put on the glaze, and when I put it back into the kiln, all the little glass powder that's in here melts and gets very, very shiny, and it sticks on the clay forever. Paint is a little bit different, but I'm going to do something special to this so the watercolor does stay on your piece. What you're going to do is watercolor it. So you can go ahead and paint patterns on the top, patterns on the side, but the paint won't go into the area where there's glaze. It won't stick. It could get the glass or the glaze kind of wet or a little bit colored, but it'll wipe off eventually. So it's going to act very differently on the glaze rather than it does here. So don't bother glazing the inside, because it doesn't work. It only works on the outside where your clay piece has not been glazed and it's ready to paint. So here's some examples of pieces that have been glazed on the inside. So it's still glassy white, and the outside is all painted different patterns, different ideas of stripes and diagonal stripes and polka dots and all kinds of different ideas that students have done in the past. And then what Mrs. Samala is going to do is take your piece and I'm going to spray it down. If you bring it back to school with a kind of a clear paint, and then the watercolor won't come off of it anymore. So it's like a spray paint that I put on there. So it's a special kind of clear coating that makes it sort of glossy. So enjoy watching the demonstration so you know how to watercolor your vases. Thanks, friends. Bye.